The marking chamber stood at the center of the Creven training facility, its obsidian walls absorbing light and hope in equal measure. Kiro pressed his scaled palm against the viewing glass, watching the younger cubs file inside. Their tails dragged low, eyes downcast. He remembered his own first marking, the searing pain across his shoulder blade where the brand had burned the symbol of his first failure into his flesh. They learn through pain, Elder Thomases had told him when he questioned the practice years ago. Pain is memory. Memory is survival. Kiro bore 17 marks now, each one a lesson carved into his body. The largest stretched across his ribs, a miscalculation during a navigation exercise that had nearly cost 3 lives. He'd never made that mistake again. None of them did. The Creven way was absolute. Fail once, remember forever. The human arrived on a Tuesday. Arya Ven stepped off the transport shuttle with nothing but a worn datapad and a smile that seemed entirely inappropriate for a military training facility. The Galactic Council had assigned her as an observer, part of some cultural exchange program that Kiro didn't understand and didn't particularly want. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage barely a century since first contact. What could they possibly teach the Creven, whose warrior tradition stretched back 10,000 years? You're Kiro? Arya extended her hand, a human greeting he'd read about but never experienced. Her skin was warm, unmarked by any visible scars or brands. I'm the training leader, yes. He didn't take her hand, uncertain of the protocol. She lowered it without offense, her smile never wavering. I'm excited to learn about your methods. The Council speaks highly of Creven efficiency. Efficiency is born from discipline, Kiro replied, turning toward the facility. Discipline is born from consequence. Over the following weeks, Arya observed everything. She watched the cubs stumble through combat simulations, fumble tactical assessments, miscalculate orbital trajectories. And after each failure, she watched them enter the marking chamber. She never flinched at their cries, but Kiro noticed how her jaw tightened, how her fingers would curl into fists at her sides. Why do you mark them? She asked one evening as they reviewed training data. So they remember? Kiro said simply. A Creven warrior cannot afford to repeat mistakes. In battle, the second error is often fatal. And this works? They never make the same mistake twice? Never. Kiro gestured to his own marks with something approaching pride. Each brand is a lesson that saved my life. Arya was quiet for a long moment. May I try something with the next training cycle? An experiment? Kiro's crest flattened skeptically. The Creven way has been proven over millennia. Just one cycle, Arya interrupted gently. If it fails, I'll recommend the Council adopt your methods across human training facilities. But if it works... She met his eyes. Maybe we can learn from each other. Against his better judgment, Kiro agreed. The next morning, Arya stood before a group of young cubs, Kiro's newest trainees, barely past their juvenile molt. They eyed her with curiosity and wariness, this strange creature with soft skin and no visible marks of learning. Today we're going to do something different, Arya announced. You're going to fail, repeatedly, spectacularly. And I'm going to celebrate every single failure. Confused murmurs rippled through the group. Kiro watched from the observation deck, arms crossed. Arya set up a complex engineering problem reassembling a quantum relay under time pressure. The first cub, a small female named Tess, approached nervously. Her hands shook as she manipulated the components. Within minutes, she'd reversed a critical connection. The relay sparked and died. Tess flinched, waiting for the summons to the marking chamber. Instead, Arya clapped her hands together. Excellent! You've just discovered that the blue connectors can't interface with the gamma nodes. That's valuable information. What did you learn? Tess blinked, confused. I learned that blue and gamma don't connect? Exactly. And now you know something you didn't know 10 minutes ago. That's called progress. Arya made a note on her datapad. Next. One by one, the cubs attempted the task. Each failed differently. Each failure earned enthusiastic feedback from Arya, not praise for the mistake itself, but recognition of what the mistake revealed. You discovered the tolerance threshold. You found the weak point in the housing. You learned what doesn't work, which means you're one step closer to what does. By the afternoon, something remarkable happened. The cubs stopped flinching before attempting tasks. Their movements became experimental rather than fearful. They started suggesting modifications, testing theories, building on each other's discoveries. Kiro descended to the training floor, his skepticism warring with what he was witnessing. They're making the same mistakes repeatedly, he pointed out to Arya. 3 cubs have already reversed the blue connector. Different cubs, Arya corrected. And each one learned it for themselves. Watch. She called Tess back. Try again. This time Tess's hands were steady. She avoided the blue gamma connection, navigated around the housing weak point another cub had discovered, and successfully assembled the relay in half the expected time. No marks, no pain, just learning. How? Kiro's voice was barely a whisper. Arya turned to him. Your method works, I won't dispute that. But it works through fear. Fear of pain, fear of marking, fear of being branded as someone who fails. And fear is a powerful motivator, but it's also a cage. She gestured to the cubs, who were now laughing as they collaborated on increasingly complex problems. Humans fail constantly. We fail more than any other species in the galaxy, probably. But we don't fear failure, we expect it. Every failure is data, every mistake is a teacher. And because we're not afraid to fail, we're not afraid to try. Kiro looked down at his marks, at the history of pain written across his body. Each one a lesson, yes, but also a warning, a boundary. A place he would never venture again. The marks ensure we don't repeat mistakes, he said quietly. But they also ensure you don't take risks, Arya replied. You don't innovate. You don't experiment. You perfect the known at the cost of discovering the unknown. She pulled up a holographic display showing human, technological advancement over the past century. The curve was exponential, chaotic, marked by as many failures as successes. We got here by failing forward. By making mistakes so enormous they became legends, then learning from them and trying again. Kiro watched his cubs unmarked, unafraid, attempting problems that would have paralyzed him at their age. They failed often, but they failed differently each time, and with each failure, they grew bolder. The marking chamber, he said finally, has been in operation for 10,000 years. I know. To close it would be to abandon our most sacred tradition? I know. Kiro's crest rose slowly. I want to try your way. With all the training cycles, but I need to understand it fully. He met her eyes. I need to learn to fail. Arya's smile could have lit the darkest corner of space. Then let's start with something simple. Try to juggle these. She produced 3 small spheres from her pack. Kiro caught them awkwardly. I don't know how to juggle. Perfect, Arya said. Then you're about to fail a lot. And that's exactly where learning begins. The spheres tumbled from his claws, bouncing across the floor. The cubs giggled. Kiro felt heat rise in his face. Shame, instinct told him. But Arya was already retrieving the spheres, that infuriating smile never wavering. Great! You've discovered that 3 objects are harder than 1. Now you know, try again? And for the first time in his life, Kiro failed without fear. The marks on his body seemed to ache less as he bent to try again and again and again. By the time the sun set, he still couldn't juggle. But he'd learned something far more valuable. That the space between failure and success wasn't a chasm to be feared, but a bridge to be crossed, one mistake at a time.